They didn't warn her. They didn't ask questions. They handcuffed my daughter on a public street for the crime of jogging past the wrong petty tyrant. And the moment I saw those cuffs around her wrists, every calm, civilized layer of me peeled away, and something cold, precise, and unstoppable took its place. HOA Karen stood there like she owned the world, chin lifted, eyes narrowed, pretending she was protecting community standards, while she used authority she never earned to humiliate a 16-year-old girl in front of her neighbors. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I walked toward them with the kind of slow certainty that tells everyone watching that the situation has already changed, and that the person who thought they were in control has absolutely no idea what they've just done. My daughter's eyes found mine, wide and shaking, but she held herself upright, even in handcuffs, even with strangers gawking from their porches. I felt fury, yes, but beneath it was something sharper, something surgical. I knew two things instantly: those cuffs were coming off, and by tomorrow the entire rotten HOA machine that allowed this to happen would come apart piece by piece in the one arena where I never lose. Before we move forward, drop a comment. Where are you watching from and what time is it right now? The officers avoided my eyes, which told me everything about how confident they actually were in what they were doing. This wasn't law enforcement. This was a favor being done for a woman who confuses control with purpose. HOA Karen crossed her arms like a school principal waiting for an apology that would never come, and I realized she truly believed she was untouchable. She thought she had the backing of security, of police, of bylaws, of fear. She didn't realize she was standing in front of the state's chief corruption prosecutor, and that she had just placed herself directly inside my jurisdiction by putting chains on my child without a shred of lawful cause. I asked one question quietly: what is the charge? The answer was a laughable string of buzzwords: loitering, trespass, failure to comply with a private directive, legal nonsense strung together to cover an ego trip. My daughter had been jogging. That was all. Jogging while inconvenient to a woman who can't stand the existence of anything she doesn't control. Neighbors stood frozen, silent spectators who had learned through fines, threats, and letters on their doors that speaking up brings punishment. I memorized every face, every badge, every name tag, not because I was angry, because I was already building a case. I leaned close to my daughter and told her something I knew she would understand. This is going to be over soon. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to argue in the street. The street wasn't my battleground. Courtrooms are. Statutes are. Evidence is. HO. Karen smirked like she'd won, like she believed handcuffs were the end of the story. For me, they were the beginning. She saw my daughter as a warning to the neighborhood: comply or be humiliated. I saw the cuffs as the single most catastrophic mistake of her carefully controlled life. She didn't just mess with a kid. She created a federal civil rights case in broad daylight, on camera, in front of witnesses, and she did it with enthusiasm. I let the officers finish their little performance, because every second of it was evidence. Every word spoken, every pointless order, every theatrical gesture from HOA Karen was another brick in the wall she would soon be forced to walk into. The cruiser pulled away with my daughter in the back seat, and the world went quiet for a moment. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I simply stood there and let the silence sharpen. In that silence, I made a decision that felt less like a choice and more like gravity. By tomorrow, the HOA that enabled this would not exist in the form it did today. Not because of anger, but because of law. Not because I'm a loud man, but because I'm a thorough one. HOA Karen had just elevated herself from neighborhood nuisance to primary subject in a criminal inquiry, and she didn't even know it yet. She thought she'd proven power. What she'd actually done was sign a legal invitation for me to dismantle everything she used to intimidate people, and I do not decline invitations like that. I called my daughter's name once and told her to breathe. She nodded. Even in cuffs, she had more dignity than the entire spectacle around her. That was when I felt humiliation harden into resolve. This wasn't going to be a complaint letter, or a meeting, or a petition. This was going to be handled the way I handle predators with titles and committees, publicly, legally, permanently. HOA. Karen met my eyes for one long second, still not understanding who she was dealing with, and smiled with the brittle confidence of someone who has never been told no. I almost felt sorry for her in that instant. Almost. Tomorrow she would understand exactly what kind of storm she had invited into her neat world of warnings, citations, bylaws, and fake authority. I turned and walked away, not because I was backing down, but because the fight had already moved somewhere she couldn't follow. It had moved into subpoenas, filings, motions, and courtrooms where posturing doesn't matter, and lies die under oath. She had chosen the wrong battlefield. She had chosen mine. Sound? I didn't sleep that night, but it wasn't from nerves. It was from momentum. When you've done this work as long as I have, there's a particular stillness that sets in once the decision is made. It's the calm of a surgeon after the diagnosis and before the first incision. I sat at my desk with the lamp on, the rest of the house quiet, and let the legal architecture form in my head piece by piece. It was going to be a clean dismantling. I replayed the image of my daughter in cuffs, not to torture myself, but to remember exactly what this was actually about. Abuse of power under color of authority. HOA Karen thought she signed an incident report. What she actually signed was the opening page of a civil rights lawsuit and the probable cause foundation of a criminal investigation. I pulled up the relevant statutes the way muscle memory pulls up breath. Unlawful detainment, conspiracy, deprivation of rights, civil liability, insurance exposure. I wasn't improvising. I was composing, and every note in that composition was going to land on her. My phone buzzed with the first file delivery right before midnight. The incident report was a masterpiece of cowardice. Flowery adjectives, no facts. A story held together with suggestion instead of law. It read like someone trying to justify a decision they already knew was indefensible. I highlighted every sentence where felt threatened replaced actual evidence. Every line was a thread. Threads are what I pull. The bodycam footage arrived next. I watched it exactly once all the way through, then again in slow motion, then again with audio transcription running beside it. Evidence isn't dramatic when you know what you're looking at. It's quiet, devastating inevitability. My daughter's voice is steady. The officer's commands wobble, and behind him, like a director whispering lines, stands HOA Karen, nodding, gesturing, brimming with petty triumph, as if she had finally bent the universe into the shape she likes. She had no idea she was recording her own downfall. At 2 a.m, I had everything I needed to begin, and that's when the second realization hit me. Tomorrow wasn't about confrontation in the sense she imagined. Tomorrow wasn't about yelling in hallways or threats or shouting matches. Tomorrow was about control of venue. Court is my territory. Procedure is my language. Evidence is my weapon. And she had obliged me by walking directly into my preferred terrain. She thought she was going to win a petty case about a flag or some imagined violation. She would arrive like royalty, ready to lecture. She would leave as a subject of investigation. It was mathematically certain, not because I wanted it, because the law demanded it. Dawn came without me noticing. The sky shifted from black to gray, and I realized my hands were already packed with folders, my suit already laid out, my arguments already written in the air. My daughter padded into the kitchen, hair tied back, eyes tired but steady. She didn't need to ask me what I was going to do. She knows me. I told her one thing only. Today, you don't go to war. I do. She nodded. No melodrama. No speeches. Just understanding between two people who had both experienced the same humiliation from different sides of it. She had felt the cold metal of handcuffs. I had felt the cold calm of the law turning like a key in a lock. We were finished being the ones reacting. The courthouse is never loud first thing in the morning. It's a building that hums instead of shouts. Shoes on tile, paper sliding, whispered conversations that sound like wind through glass. I walked through security, and the guards nodded, not as a courtesy, but as recognition of routine. I've been part of that place longer than most of its furniture. And then I saw her. HOA Karen was holding court in the hallway like she was exactly where she belonged. Perfectly pressed suit, manicured confidence, surrounded by a few board members who laughed just a little too loudly at everything she said. It's remarkable how people behave, when they think the story is already over and they've written the ending themselves. She looked right past me, of course. To her, I was just another resident, another annoyance, another problem she believed she could paper over with citations and smugness. I took my seat in the back, as her case was called. She went to the stand and transformed herself into a performance. Her voice softened, her eyebrows knit in pained concern. She spoke about community fabric and shared expectations, as though she were the guardian of civilization itself, rather than the president of a homeowners association with a taste for control. She made herself sound wounded by nonconformity. She made rules sound sacred, and she lied, casually, rehearsed, without the slightest sense she might one day be asked to account for it. Her lawyer guided her like a tour director, steadying her whenever she strayed too close to the truth. It was all so predictable that it almost bored me. Then recess was called, and boredom evaporated. Hallways during recess are where reality lives. Her entourage clustered around her, congratulating, reassuring, already tasting victory. Mr. Henderson leaned against the wall near a window, looking like a man who has survived storms only to be asked to apologize for the rain. I walked forward and stopped exactly close enough. When I spoke her name, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Sharp things don't need volume to cut. She turned, irritation already loaded into her expression, the disdainful half-smile of someone preparing to dismiss another complaint. And then I gave her my name. Nothing else. Not title, not threat, not explanation. Just my name, spoken the way you say a verdict you already know is binding. Her lawyer recognized it first. His face told the story before she even knew there was one. Color gone, jaw slackening, eyes widening in the way you only see when someone realizes they have already lost and just haven't caught up to it yet. He looked at her not with loyalty, but with the silent panic reserved for people standing too close to a fall. She saw his face, then mine, and you could see the confidence fracture. Not explode, crack, fine lines running through porcelain certainty. She opened her mouth to say something dismissive, and then shut it again because I began speaking, and every word I said was not loud, not emotional, but final. I laid out what had happened in language that didn't leave space for her favorite tricks. No euphemisms, no HOA vocabulary, federal statute numbers, chain of custody, unlawful detainment under color of authority, conspiracy with a state actor, civil liability extending to individual board members under their own charter. Her attorney tried to interrupt, and I didn't even look at him. I stayed locked on her because she was the decision-maker, the instigator, the one who believed she was immune. And then I explained the part she had not anticipated. This wasn't a complaint, or a grievance, or a letter to the board. This was now an active investigation. Subpoenas were being issued, bodycam footage preserved, insurance carriers notified, directors' and officers' coverage already under threat. I said all of it softly. People stopped walking. The hallway noise drained away into a vacuum. She didn't scream. Arrogant people rarely do when it first hits. She just stood there with that brittle little smile trying to hold its shape, while the reality underneath it dissolved. That is what real consequences feel like. Not drama, not shouting, silence pressing in from every direction. Her board members stepped back an inch at a time, without realizing they were doing it. No one wants to be physically close to someone whose luck has just inverted. Henderson straightened by the window. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His flag was no longer the story. She was. I watched the realization move through her like a slow electrical current, starting in the eyes, tightening the jaw, then settling into the posture of someone who suddenly understands that the room she thought she controlled is no longer hers. She tried to speak, to reassert some scrap of dominance. But every attempt stumbled because there is no bylaw language that works when the person in front of you is the one who signs off on indictments. I didn't threaten her. I didn't need to. I simply explained the inevitable sequence already in motion, that the same system she had been playing with like a toy now regarded her as a problem to be corrected. Her lawyer finally found his voice, whispering at her to stop talking, to not answer questions, to let him speak for her. But she wasn't listening because it had finally dawned on her that none of this was going to be solved by the familiar tricks of intimidation or committee meetings. She had spent years mistaking fear for respect. In a single morning she was learning the difference. I told her calmly that she would receive service shortly, that preservation orders were already filed, and that every email she had ever sent from her HOA account was now a liability with a case number attached to it. She said my daughter had been non-compliant, and I let the word hang there between us until she realized how it sounded when spoken aloud in a courthouse hallway with witnesses and recorders and officers of the court all around. Non-compliant is what petty tyrants call anyone who refuses to kneel. In my world, we use different words: unlawful, retaliatory, punitive, actionable. Her confidence drained in increments, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow leak, like air leaving an overinflated balloon that no one will ever refill again. I turned away before she could respond, because nothing she said now mattered. The work was already moving. Investigators were already drafting questions she didn't know existed. Judges were already signing orders she would soon be forced to obey. The hallway resumed its noise behind me, but it sounded different now, like a current flowing in one direction, carrying her toward consequences she could no longer postpone or control. The rest of the day unfolded with the slow, mechanical precision of a machine I had already switched on, each cog engaging the next, whether she liked it or not. Subpoenas were served, not with theatrics, but with the clinical indifference that hurts worse than shouting, because it makes it obvious you are no longer seen as powerful, only as a subject of process. Board members who had spent years parroting her orders suddenly discovered their phones were very busy, each of them receiving the same terse notifications from their insurers, their employers, and in some cases their own attorneys, telling them in careful language that proximity to her was now a financial hazard. The bravado that had once filled their HOA meetings evaporated the moment they realized the personal liability clause they had all voted through without reading had finally come home to roost. Whispers became frantic calls, loyalties dissolved, and the same neighbors who had once been her chorus of approval began drafting statements designed to save themselves by making it clear she had been the architect, and they merely frightened participants. By late afternoon, documents that had been guarded for years began to surface voluntarily, forwarded to my office with apologetic notes and timestamps, because fear of her had been replaced by fear of the law, which is the proper order of things. I went home that evening to a quiet house, my daughter asleep on the couch, exhaustion finally having won against adrenaline, and I stood for a long moment just watching her breathe. No speech, no declaration. Just the steady confirmation that the only outcome that mattered was already secured. The HOA president, once so certain of her authority, was now entangled in a process she could not out-talk or outvote, and tomorrow would not bring strategy meetings or smug emails. It would bring arraignment schedules and counsel consultations, and the long, humiliating realization that the system she had abused would now define every hour of her life. She spent years confusing paperwork with power, but now the paperwork had teeth, and every page was pointed directly at her. The courtroom was no longer an abstract word she threw around in letters meant to scare retirees. It had become the room that swallowed her voice. She walked in dressed for control, but control had already been repossessed and itemized. My filings were not emotional, not loud, not theatrical. They were surgical cuts through every illusion she had about how the world worked when it was not arranged around her. One motion after another stripped away the shields she thought she owned, qualified immunity fantasies, misused bylaws, the tired lie that she had simply followed procedure. The judge listened, not to her tone, but to the facts, and facts do not flinch when someone raises their voice. She tried to argue that she had only wanted community order, but the bodycam footage did not care about her intentions, the arrest record did not care about her story, and the federal statute numbers did not care about her feelings. She was forced to sit and watch as every protection she believed she had evaporated, replaced by personal liability so real she could feel it settling on her shoulders. Her board members, once eager to orbit her, were now staring straight ahead, doing the math on their own bank accounts, and how far loyalty stretched when it started costing actual money. She spoke less and less, not because she had grown wise, but because there is a point in every collapse when words stop working. By the time the judge announced that the HOA's actions would be subject to full civil and potential criminal scrutiny, she was no longer performing authority. She was absorbing it. The gavel did not thunder. It didn't need to. The quiet weight of that decision landed hard. His voice could. She looked at me once as we left, searching for some hint of compromise, some offer of truce, but there was nothing left to negotiate. Authority she had counterfeited for years had finally been compared to the real thing, and it disintegrated on contact. The end didn't arrive with shouting or spectacle. It arrived with signatures, silence, and the unmistakable sound of authority changing hands. The HOA charter that she had once waved like a scepter was read aloud, not as doctrine, but as evidence of misuse, and then it was dissolved in the same calm tone used to announce routine. No one rushed to defend her. No one rose to object. The same neighbors she had bullied into applause now sat very still, watching the structure that had ruled their lives collapse under the weight of its own misuse. The board resigned in a single-file line of quiet, defeated acknowledgments, each one understanding that the only thing left to save was themselves. Fees were refunded, fines were vacated, records were cleared, and the machine she had built to intimidate people was shut down with clinical finality. She stood off to the side without a podium, without a microphone, without the illusion that anyone was waiting to hear what she thought should happen next. When the order was entered and the court adjourned, there was no dramatic escort, no raised voices, no last furious speech. Chairs scraped, papers were gathered, people walked past her the way they walk past outdated furniture, noticed but no longer relevant. Outside the courthouse, familiar faces she once summoned with notices and threats didn't look at her with fear or anger. They simply didn't look at her at all. She opened her mouth as if to reclaim something, anything, but nothing followed. Authority had left the room hours earlier and hadn't invited her along. By evening, the neighborhood she once patrolled with citations and warnings was quiet in a different way, not controlled, simply peaceful. Flags reappeared. Laughter returned to porches she used to police. Porch lights came on without permission slips. She drove through the same streets she once ruled and found they no longer responded to her presence. No doors closed, no blinds twitched. No one moved because she moved. Power, she finally understood, had not been taken from her. It had never belonged to her in the first place. She did not rage. She did not cry. She simply went still, a figure standing in the fading light while a world she once mistook for hers continued on without her.